Welcome to the final days. Today is March 23rd, 2019. Today we will be viewing a total solar eclipse lasting 4.5 hours. Heavily cratered celestial orbs rolling across the sky, two huge orbs next to each other, big changes in a dark nebula from our last video, moons from a foreign system, and other sky anomalies not mentioned in mainstream news. The purpose of this channel is to show the viewers that we are living in the very last days according to the Holy Bible, and to explain why this is very good news and cause for celebration, explained later in this video. The unedited images shown in this video were obtained this month from the Federal Aviation weather cameras in Alaska and Canada. Each image is 10 minutes apart from the next, forming a time-lapse video when strung together, such as the one playing now from the south-facing weather camera in Fort Yukon, Alaska. Here we see a large celestial object going in the same direction as the sun. We know this cannot be a lens flare because the object is being partially illuminated by the sun. Essentially, it's reacting to the sun. A lens flare in an image can never react to light because it's produced within the camera. This orb is part of a planetary system that has entered our solar system, bringing with it its own dark nebula that we saw in the last video. We will be looking at that nebula again because some interesting changes have occurred in it since the last time it was shown. Jesus is describing the final days before the onslaught of the Great Tribulation in the Bible's book of Luke, chapter 21, verse 25, when he clearly tells us that we will see these signs in the sky. The southwest-facing camera in Talkeetna, Alaska, shows another one of these enormous lenses in the sky that we saw in the last video. However, the atmosphere is a little more clear the day this footage was obtained, and some detail shows up on this mammoth lens. We know this can't be a lens flare because the sunlight reacts to this large object. Notice how the glare reaches toward it. These gigantic lenses are in place to bend light and also render celestial objects out of focus, as we've seen on many of these images. A closer look at this lens shows some texture. Since the texture appears to be non-uniform, it is likely that this is damage caused by space debris and small meteors. The southwest-facing camera in Stony Rapids, Saskatchewan, in Canada, shows the sun flashing dramatically. Ignore the vertical lines in these images. This is typical of most Canadian FAA weather cameras. Whenever the sun is in the image, it's a type of a lens flare. We saw a good example of this flashing sun in our March 6 video taken from the south-facing camera in Anchorage, Alaska, where the sun appears to be flashing wildly in a possible condition of malfunction. Of course, the flashing we see cannot possibly be produced by our sun, or we would all be burnt to a crisp. The malfunction we are viewing is produced by some equipment that NASA launched between the Earth and the sun, very close to the Earth, of course. This equipment produces a circular glare thousands of miles in diameter, and it tracks in perfect synchronization with our sun. Once in a while, the center of this equipment is visible, but not always. When visible, it shows up as a black dot, which casts its own reflection upon the water surface, proving that it's not a camera or lighting issue, but instead is an actual piece of equipment. The west-facing camera in Chokiotsuk, Alaska, shows that same fast-rotating red crater-pocked sphere we see from hundreds of cameras across Alaska and Canada. We know it can't be a lens flare because it's rotating much faster than our sun rotates, and also it goes behind the electric lines and the clouds. It travels across the sky slower than the sun, causing daily total solar eclipses, as shown in this older footage from Sitka, Alaska, when the sun was lower in the sky. It starts out with NASA's equipment emitting a black beam in preparation for either an eclipse or a near eclipse. Whenever the black center of NASA's glare equipment would be visible to the lower 48 states, heavy chemtrailing of the sun is performed to hide it. The manufactured circular glare always stays in front of the celestial object during an eclipse, while the real sun passes behind it, concealing the eclipse from view. All of the odd-shaped items in this footage are reflections of the equipment used to conceal these daily eclipses. As mentioned in several previous videos, if we draw a straight line from the equipment's pink reflection to the center of the artificial light, the eclipsing object always falls upon that line, without exception. Again, we see the black dot of NASA's equipment reflecting upon the water here. Many of you have seen the dark nebula from the south-facing camera in Attawapiskat, Ontario, in Canada. There's something new about this structure, which our sun goes behind for 4.5 hours daily from northern Canada. We don't see this from the lower 48 states. Also, I'll explain what a nebula is. We know the sun is hidden behind the nebula because in one single frame of this video, the sun suddenly shrinks to 1/5 its size. That's because the real sun has now gone behind this structure, and NASA's circular glare is now in front of it. However, NASA's artificial light is no match for the real sun because it almost looks like nighttime. I've gotten some feedback from people whose screens don't have enough contrast to see this structure, so I've added some contrast to some of these frames. This footage was downloaded yesterday, March 22nd. As the light source approaches the right side of the screen, much more of this structure is now visible. Eventually, the light passes over this entire nebula, and the real sun emerges from behind it, resuming its normal size once again, and the landscape suddenly brightens. The new thing on this nebula is over on the right side. If we move the light back and forth over it, we didn't see this part before. And I don't know if it's because we are going around to a different side of the nebula very slowly, or if it's getting closer. I'm not sure. But this part of the nebula over on the right side of the screen, we didn't see this before. The dictionary definition of a nebula is a cloud of gas and dust in outer space. Here's a Wikipedia article on the Eagle Nebula, viewed from the Hubble telescope. Many planetary systems carry along with them their own nebula. Since our own solar system never had a nebula, this tells us that this nebula is accompanying the approaching planetary system, now intermingled with our own solar system. This inbound planetary system will make its closest pass to Earth during the biblically foretold time of the Great Tribulation, described in the Bible's book of Revelation. The reason this is great news for Christians is because Jesus clearly promises us that he will remove his faithful followers from Earth before the worst part of the Great Tribulation is underway. In Luke chapter 21, verse 36, it reads, "Watch therefore and pray always, that you may be counted worthy to escape all these things that will come to pass." Jesus is referring to the Great Tribulation. He is saying that those who are counted worthy will escape God's wrath. To be counted worthy, we must be living in holiness. A link in the description box below discusses what holiness is and how to achieve it. We are currently looking at the sky from Seward, Alaska. We know this can't be a lens flare of the sun because this object is rotating much faster than our sun, which rotates only once every 27 Earth days. This footage from the east-facing camera in Taslina, Tulsona, Alaska, shows the craft that makes the odd-shaped pink reflection in thousands of these images daily. In a concealment effort, it always flies between the celestial object and our own perspective here on the ground. This small moon is barely visible without contrast. Some close-up images of the small moon show that it's heading in the complete opposite direction as our sun. We know this can't be a lens flare because it's partially illuminated by the light. A lens flare can never become partially illuminated or react to the sun in any way because it's created from within the camera. These are more of the signs of the end of the age that Christians are commanded to watch for, so that we are not ignorant of the very late hour in which we are living, and so that we can be spiritually prepared for what lies ahead. This video footage from the south-facing camera in Thompson Pass, Alaska, also captures the craft. This craft works with NASA's equipment that produces the large circular glare. It is always seen flying in front of the celestial object being concealed. These close-ups with contrast show the craft in front of the gigantic orb. We don't see the reflection of the craft in this footage because the sun is not in the image. The contrast always works better if there are no places with glare, sun, or white clouds within the contrast section. These close-ups provide a very good concept of the enormity of some of these celestial objects hidden from our view. The southwest-facing camera in Willow, Alaska shows two huge objects in the sky. We know these can't be lens flares because NASA's light source is reacting to these objects. Notice how the glare seems to reach out toward these objects. The sun can never react to a lens flare, which is created from within the camera. During these frames, which last about 2 hours, notice that these two large orbs don't move at all. They are completely stationary. These are more of the lenses in place for bending light and removing focus to hide this approaching planetary system, which will make its closest pass during the biblically foretold Great Tribulation, which we believe will begin very soon. The enemies of Christ do not want you to know how close we are to the end. They do not want you to give your life to Christ before your time runs out. The south-facing camera at Isabel Pass, Alaska, captured a gigantic red celestial object, different from the one we saw just moments ago. This one is several times larger and much more difficult to see. I'll play the footage as it came off the camera. It's very faint, and you can only see it if your screen has good contrast. Some contrast added to the object makes it more visible. As we go through the images, it's easy to see that this object is much larger than the red planet that we often see daily throughout Alaska and Canada. Here is something similar to what we just saw. These were taken last year in March from the south-facing camera in Marshall, Alaska. Now, whether or not it's the same exact object, I don't know. It could be. The atmospheric chemicals are heavier this year, reducing visibility, so it's hard to compare these same two objects. As you can see in these images, if the contrast is limited to only where it's needed, it works much better. Any glare, white clouds, or sunshine within the contrast area cause it to not work as well. All of the smoke and mirrors used to hide this inbound planetary system were no doubt created with the help of fallen angel technology. They've been here much longer than we have, and they're much smarter than we are. The enemies of Christ do not want you to know how close to the end we are. They do not want you to give your life to Christ before your time runs out. This system will be making its closest pass to Earth during the time of the Great Tribulation, which is very close. No one knows the exact day that the Great Tribulation will begin, but Christ commands us to watch for these signs so that we can be spiritually prepared and help others to be prepared. When Jesus discusses the coming of the Great Tribulation in Luke 21:36, he says, "Watch therefore, and pray always that you may be counted worthy to escape all these things that will come to pass." He is promising that those who are counted worthy will escape God's wrath of the Great Tribulation. To be counted worthy, we must be living in holiness. A link in the description box below discusses what holiness is and how to achieve it. These next few screens will tell you how to accept Christ into your life in the event you are seeking Him. Simply pause the screens if you need more time to read the text. Please click on the thumbs up so this video comes up in searches for others in need of this information. Thank you.